dang, we need to modernize our government. The fact that you couldn't even get, I spent thousands of dollars trying to resolve that because I had to go through an accountant because they're the only ones that had, access to this special number that they had. And so, but like that was such a eye-opening experience for me on how just antiquated we're still operating in the federal government. And if 20X can accelerate adoption of technology and modernizing how we communicate with the American people, like who wouldn't get behind that? And obviously for DoD as well. I mean, like anytime we can modernize how we're protecting our nation. I mean, like who wouldn't be on board with that mission? But it's with a healthy dose of skepticism because, of course, we really want to do this, but we don't know how we're going to do it. So we need you to figure it out. And when you're already working with cloud service providers who have dumped millions of dollars into achieving Rev 5 the old-fashioned way, and now you're saying, okay, well, now it's not enough that you've already dumped millions of dollars. Now we're going to ask you to dump even more to figure out how do we automate all of this. And, we want to be part of the solution too. Like we're already starting to integrate like AI and how we're delivering our services or how we can integrate it. We're looking at use cases as well. We've done it, like I said, in Compliance Essentials already, and we're obviously leveraging Paramify to try and help automate, documentation development because nobody's coming to us because, wow, you really write a great SSP. They're coming to us for expertise because we know how to meet the controls, how to meet the KSIs that have been defined, and because we've been doing this for decades at this point, and we know what they're looking for. We know what's acceptable to most agencies because we've worked with most of the agencies at this point. And so that's really the value that we're still bringing. The administrative stuff, I mean, if we can automate that and Kanban and POEM management, and those are just ripe for automation, right? But some of the other stuff I think is going to be a little more complicated. I mean, we're even dealing with one enterprise organization now that they want to centralize all of their compliance and automate a lot of it, but they're like, we're dealing with multiple business units and not all of them are going to allow us to just set up an API and be able to pull data because a lot of these are through acquisitions and stuff like that. There's a lot of politics at play there. So that's why I say, like, as we get more complicated or as we get more complex architectures and organizations, that's when I think the challenges are going to be even more.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the Paramify Podcast. I'm so excited for this one.
This is going to be a great one.
It's going to be a good one.
So we are here with Karen Laughton, who is the Executive Vice President at Coalfire over the advisory division. So Karen's been there, you said 11 years. And prior to that, got her Bachelor of Science from Virginia Tech, serves on the Business Information Technology Advisory Board there. And have been really involved with kind of community and philanthropic efforts, the National Charity League, Young Men's Service League. For 5 years, you were on the board of the Isabella Santos Foundation, which is a pediatric cancer nonprofit, which is very cool. So currently a CISSP and CISA. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So you mentioned before we start recording, you have a funny story about your CISSP.
Yeah. So, I say on my bio that I have a Bachelor of Science degree. I was a psychology major. So like I had no business getting into this industry. I started off and I was thinking I want to be a marriage and family counselor. But I had to pay for my own college. And so by the time I saw and I was pretty good about getting scholarships and, I did Corps of Cadets to help offset some of the cost of college at Tech. I also went to, Virginia Tech. So I basically decided after 9/11, it was all the rage to get your top secret clearance. And my friend worked at Unisys at the time. And she was just like, hey, I'm leaving my job and they're looking for somebody. Would you want to, take over as like the project controller for this DoD contract? And it was doing compliance related work. And at the time I was in human resources because what do you do with a psychology degree out of college except go into human resources? And I was like, top secret clearance sounds cool. I want to do that. So I leave my human resources job at Unisys and transfer onto this DoD contract working with the TRICARE management activity. doing basically going to military health facilities and doing like physical security assessments and network assessments. And so I started off, and essentially DoD then came out with the memorandum that you had to get your CISSP. And I was like, oh Lord, I have no cybersecurity experience whatsoever. And how am I going to pass my CISSP? But basically, to be on that contract, I had to have it. And so I said, okay, well, I'll go take a boot camp and study for it. And if I pass, I'll take that as a sign that I'm meant to be in cybersecurity. And if I fail, then I'll take it as a sign that I should go back to human resources and recruiting. And so I was also in my first trimester of being pregnant when I went to go take the exam. And so I'm in full blown like morning sickness and like had to stop every, so often to eat some, saltine crackers in the back of the room. And this is back when it was like paper and pencil. And so I was like one of the last people to finish because of that. And I ended up passing on the first try, so I took it as a sign.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
That
Very cool.
I actually, I know it's hard to believe, but I actually passed it too. And it was really hard. It's a lot. And I think what my takeaway was after I passed it, I was like, man, I spent way too much time on that physical security section. You're like this. I was like, I'm like, why did I spend all that time like memorizing like, facts about things? And it's not really relevant anymore, especially today, so much of it. But it does really require you to go at least an inch deep and a mile wide in cybersecurity. And I think that it's a really good idea to take that exam so that you can understand whether or not you like the area. Because a lot of people who want to get into cyber, they'll go, hey, I'm going to take the CISSP, and I'm like, this absolutely sucks. I'm not going to do it. But if you are like, oh, I could see how this is important, you go like, you know what, I might actually be good at this. And so anyways, kudos for passing that. I let mine lapse.
That was my favorite part too, because I didn't know really anything. So the only thing I knew was what I learned in the book and in the boot camp. And so I remember thinking of all these new, mnemonic devices to remember everything. And like, I think not knowing anything. So the only way you knew, anything was what you learned in the book. And that's obviously what drives the exam. So I think it was almost a good thing. But then you had to have a minimum amount of like cybersecurity experience to actually get your full CISSP. And I was like, huh. Well, I mean, like, I've been installing like antivirus on my computer since like I had a computer. Like, that's cybersecurity. So I literally counted that as my cybersecurity experience. Yeah, I mean, I've been running scans. Like, sure.
We're, this episode is actually brought to you by like device management. Because you'll see I'm like wiggling this device over here for Keaton because we have a coarse-grained security control for our FedRAMP high where it's like, hey, it locks you out. I'm like, hey, just apply it to every computer. I'm like, what could go wrong? But like, we haven't quite implemented exceptions for our salespeople. So we'll have like, hey, we have a demo going, and then someone will go to lunch, and then it will just show like Spencer's screensaver of like, like waves going. And I'm like, we should probably figure this out. Yeah, so we haven't done it yet, so this is brought to you by AC7 or whatever the control is. Yeah.
Get that mouse jiggler.
Oh, we'll just do an exception. We'll handle it. Yeah. We can handle it. You're not touching Tech Ops Prod, are you, Keaton? No. He said no.
They don't trust Keaton, but they don't trust me either. So.
That's true. You don't have a UV key.
I don't. I actually do have a UV key.
But it's not
provisioned.
provisioned.
It is in my desk, unopened. Because we ordered it and then decided I didn't need access.
Well, what do you have to do to earn the right to have access?
Yeah. Trial. There's a set of trials.
I was gonna say.
Dungeon wisdom test you have to pass.
Makes sense.
So you've had a lot of experience then because you've been doing this for 2 decades, right? Which project felt like, and I also learned yesterday that you're a runner. You like running, or you used to run.
Yeah.
So
I hurt my knee and then I just went off the rails after that. Yeah.
Okay.
Getting old sucks.
Yeah, it sure does. I'm the same. That's why I don't do it.
Right. Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. Now I'm old, so I focused on strength training.
Okay. Well, that's great. I'm working on it, Actually, not.
You're not old enough for that. Too old for the running, not quite old enough for the strength training.
That's true also. So which project for you felt like running a marathon in flip-flops? And like, you know, I don't know, something that was really hard, the most painful project, you're like, dang.
I mean, I wouldn't say like any of them have been painful per se. Like I think, well, I mean, like in the scheme of things, like FedRAMP, I think when that came about, like that started off as very painful because, every single project you'd and like I felt like depended on what TR you got, technical reviewer you got was how they interpreted the controls. And so it's like as an advisor, you're just guessing what's going to be accepted and what isn't. And so like and you'd reach out to them and say like, "Hey, we're um this is how they implemented the control, is this going to be acceptable?" And they would give you like this vague answer back. But then when you turned in the package, they had like all the clarity in the world of what was going to be acceptable and what wasn't going to be acceptable. Like we can't give you advice on what tools to use or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not asking about the tool. I'm asking about the implementation. And they'd basically just regurgitate the control back to you. And you're like, okay. I mean, now, obviously we've been doing this for, over a decade now. And so we know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But in the beginning, it was painful because you were just trying to figure out like how they interpreted the controls. It's kind of similar to the CISSP. It's like, why people struggled with it, in the beginning was because if you actually had cybersecurity experience, which not many people did back then, then they would, well, this is how I would do it. And then they struggled to pass the exam. And then people who didn't know how they would do it, thrived. And that's kind of how it was with the beginning of FedRAMP.
It's interesting because the CISSP is based on, NIST, right? And so for us that like took it like, oh yeah, NIST makes a lot of sense to us, right?
Right.
But
It
that's
did. But it's like, even, I mean, I've been writing SSPs, well, not anymore, thank God. But back in the day, in the FSMA days where you could just implement it however you wanted to. And then FedRAMP became so prescriptive. So it was challenging in the beginning, but now it's like we can do it in our sleep, thank goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, the early days must have been tough. I was actually I was not part of, but saw an SEC examination happening once, and it was very similar. They would find all these things, and they'd be like, "We don't like these things." And we'd be like, "Okay, what don't you like?" And they're like, "We just don't like it. Just these are the things we don't like."
But if it's the SEC saying it, you're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
neither do we.
Right.
We don't like it either. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What you like today, what's it gonna be tomorrow? That's the game that you had to play sometimes. So what is like I don't know. What is your biggest like eye roll nitpick, like documentation nitpick, one that you can remember off the top of your head, right? Where like the answer changes a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the nitpick was when they started like, requiring such a finite amount of detail in the network or in the architecture diagrams. It's like we want every IP address known to man in there. And it's like, really? Like, why? Like, what's that going to do for you? How is that improving security? And so I think just like, and then it's like, oh, well, now that you want that finite amount of detail in this diagram, well, now it doesn't match the 7 other diagrams we want in the SSP with like, the data flow diagram and the network diagram, and then you got the boundary diagram, and it's like, they don't all jive. And it's like, well, that's because you want such a immense amount of detail in there. And I think it was really challenging for a lot of people to make sure like, well, if you make a change here, you have to make the change in like 20 different other places. And it's like, that's why I love kind of the direction that we're moving into, because we're eliminating, a lot of the PMO review. While it did provide value to, validate that the 3PAO was doing quality work, I also think a lot of the feedback, when you looked at, what feedback they were giving, it was like little nitpicky things like that, where it's like, really, are we moving the needle here on whether or not this is meeting the spirit of the controls? And, what difference does it make, really? As long as it's passing penetration testing and vulnerability scanning and all of the above.
Yeah. So speaking of the direction we're moving, so you've been a part of FedRAMP since the early days, part of FSMA before that. What are some of the things you like about the ways that it's changed over the years, and what are some of the things that you either don't like or feel, cautious about?
I mean, just the concept of FedRAMP itself, I've always really liked, coming from the FSMA background where every agency was doing its own thing. And, the if one agency, one service would maybe have to go through, 6 or 7, 8, 10, 12 different assessments, and every agency wanted something different. I loved having the oversight of PMO to help that do once, use many. And while every agency was still responsible for accepting risk on behalf of their agency, you just have to go through one assessment. And yeah, you may have to sprinkle in some extra parameters or extra controls based on the agency. Like U.S. persons requirement wasn't a FedRAMP requirement. That was some agencies wanted that. But now I think the direction we're moving into where we're almost putting the responsibility back in the agencies into what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, I think that's going to create its own challenges. But I do like that we're trying to focus more on risk and security and less on check the box compliance. So seeing that shift is really refreshing, and I love the direction that they're going in. I just don't love the decentralization of it all because I think that's going to be really challenging, not just for cloud service providers to keep up with, especially, huge enterprise cloud service providers who are servicing, m- yeah, hundreds of agencies. It's going to be really challenging for them. And then for agencies, to have to go to, depending, let's just say they're using 50 different cloud service providers. Now they potentially have to go through 50 different portals to figure out the risk for that agency. That doesn't scale. So that's some of my concerns, but I love like just the general, I mean, obviously I think we're going to work a lot of that out through the pilots, and, a lot could change by the time these pilots are done. But I'm glad that we're starting with the low pilot where it's super simple, and we can kind of do lessons learned and cut our teeth on it and figure out, is this even possible before we roll it out, to the masses.
Yeah, so like FedRAMP 20X is what we're referring to. We actually didn't mention it.
Oh,
Right?
yeah,
We
sorry.
didn't call it
We know
FedRAMP
what we're
20.
talking about.
Yeah,
Keep up, people.
that's right. And so we're well into that. Sounds like you're optimistic about like some of the direction. What are you actually? Okay, so we're right now 20X as we said today. It's July. We just had 4th. What's today? July something.
July something.
It's July 9th. It's July 9th, 2025. And so right now the pilot is for low impact systems. And it's funny because like most of the cloud service providers that are doing it are actually already like high impact systems. They're just doing the pilot, right? And so I know for us, we didn't really change anything with the way that we're doing things. We just said, okay, let's just map these capabilities that we already have to KSIs. So I'm pretty optimistic about it, but we're only doing it for low. What do you think are the biggest challenges as we go to moderate and high? Right? What are some of the bigger challenges that we're going to face specific to the KSIs?
I mean, I think even the challenges that we're seeing at low, where, making sure that when we are getting the results, that that the boundary has been defined properly, that we're including all the components that make up the boundary in the results, of the evidence that we're sharing. That gets a lot more complex when you're, a much larger boundary, and that you may be using tons of third-party service providers. You might have multi-cloud. You may not be containerized. So there's a lot of more variables that we're going to have to deal with at moderate and certainly at the high. And then defining the KSIs for high, I think, is going to be interesting. Because obviously the data is much more critical at high. And so, I can't wait. I mean, I want it to move in this direction, right? Like, I'm so supportive of the concept. And I just think it's going to be a long road, for us to really be able to ensure that we're, not doing this at the cost of good security practices. I think sometimes we're trying to, and we put a blog out about this
Yeah,
a
good
couple
one.
months ago.
We'll put a link in our
Um,
notes. What is that called?
sh-
Do you remember?
um,
You don't have to.
FedRAMP 20X. No, I don't know.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
written so many of them.
They're
Yeah,
blogs.
there's just like Google, Coalfire 20X blogs, and there's like probably a million of them. But this one was written by Nate DeMuth, and it was, really in depth as far as, are we solving the right problem? And are we trying to take our old methodologies and modernize them? And should we just dump the old methodologies and really just focus more on, should we be focusing more on like red teaming and penetration testing and obviously still vulnerability management and all of that? But like, if it can't be penetrated in any simulation attack that you do, then obviously you've got good security practices in place. And so it's like, are we really still doing check the box with KSIs, even though how we're demonstrating them may be more flexible? Or are we really improving security in that manner? Or should we be looking at this in from a completely different angle? And I think, it'll be interesting to see if it evolves into something like that as we get into the more complex architectures.
I love that. Yeah, and you guys used a phrase in that blog, the automation of arrested development.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
See, you were
it
able
was
to
good.
Google it.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't have
We
my
we
phone.
we Google stalked you. So talk to me more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, that was essentially focused on just changing, like I said, the lens that we're looking through solving this problem. And looking at it, we kind of walked through all the different ways that we could go about 20X the way that it's currently being looked at. And everything sort of ended in this isn't going to scale. Like I think we walked through like 3 different paths we could go down as far as who owns it. Is it FedRAMP PMO? Is it the agency? Is it the cloud service provider? Is it the 3PAO? And, no matter which way we looked at it, going about it the way we're going about it today, it ended in it's going to fail and it doesn't scale. As we get into more complex architectures, I think it's going to be fine for level. That's already working, right? But because even like I said, like who's going to own it? Like we keep talking about, oh, the infrastructure providers are going to come out with all these great solutions, but, they're not just going to give it away. Whoever figures out this like magic Pandora box of wonderful automation, they're going to sell it, right? Like nobody's just going to be like, I'll put it on Git, guys. Go ahead. You guys can do this yourself now. And it was really just trying to look at it through a completely different perspective of just how we identify good security practices. And again, it's more through technical testing and less through, does it meet this KSI? Does it meet these NIST requirements? It's just kind of throwing all that in the...
Yeah.
The challenge is with risk management, you have 2 sides to it. You always have the implementation, which, cloud service providers can have, how they're going to implement risk management, and then their tools. Are those going to be used? That's one thing. But the second part of risk management is assurance. And so for assurance, some of the things that need to happen is you need to have a completeness of the populations of the things that you're assessing. How do you know that you're getting everything? If I'm going to give an opinion on this control, whether it's working, I want to know, am I getting everything? And so to your point, when you're getting into these really complex cloud service environments, that's really hard to automate that for every single use case. You cannot get there very easily. All right.
Well, and it highlights a part of the blog you guys talked about as well, which we say a lot on here. Cloud service providers one of the biggest step in it that tends to be missed is the planning. It's the strategy side of it. And you guys said in that blog, you talked about how automation is a tool, it's not a strategy. And I think we see that a lot too. We obviously automate a lot for our clients in the FedRAMP process, but we try to tell them at the start, you have to go through, like it has to start with planning. You've got to start with the data, right? And when I started at Paramify, Kenny said to me 1,000 times a day, you got to remember it's all about the data. And so you've got to start there. And then what are the people, processes, and technologies that are touching it, and how are they all interacting? And then you kind of build it out from there.
Right. Well, and I think in the working group they just had that had all of the pilot participants in it. I mean, literally the 3PAO that was on there was talking about it there too. Like, we can't just like say, oh, here's all the artifacts and like trust it. Like, we first have to understand like what's in the boundary. Did it hit all of the components within the boundary? What are the processes behind each of like how you're trying to meet the KSIs so we can see whether the evidence actually reflects that. And so you're right. Like, I think there's always going to be some level of manual intervention that needs to take place because we have to understand what it is we're even looking at. And so I thought that was a really good point on the working group that people kind of forget. Like, there's still going to be some level of 3PAOs can't go away, and I don't say that because we are one. I just don't see how we can. I mean, that's AI in general. Like everybody's like, oh, AI is going to take over the world and there are going to be no jobs. That's not true. There always has to be some level of manual review to ensure that the integrity of the data is there, and we're preventing any of the
It's the other side of the coin
inaccuracies.
you talk about, right?
Yeah. There was a really awesome talk by what's Andre's last name? I forget,
The giant.
Yeah.
It's the first one I thought of.
Andre, the guy, he was a former CTO at Tesla, right? And he talked about, we'll put it in the notes. I should know I should know the names of who I'm referring to before I mention it. Maybe dub
He's
it
like
over.
Madonna, where he just has
Yeah,
one
yeah,
name.
yeah.
It's just Andrej.
Okay. He just talked about where we are in AI. Is it really going to automate everything, right? And it's really incredible what it does, but it has certain limitations that we're very early in the cycle. He compared it to like we're in the 60s, right? Again, and everything's but the thing is a lot of the innovations with AI, those came or in the 60s, a lot of the innovations in cyber came from government, right? They had access to all of the awesome newest tech. We had the space program, all of those things were in government. But now with AI, it's different. It's on the other side. It's the cloud service providers that are providing these new capabilities, and it's decentralized. So it's really interesting. What we have right now with ChatGPT is a terminal, and so you put things into the terminal and it gives all sorts of answers back. And so we've taken away the user experience side of it, and it's headless. We don't know what it looks like. And so some of the outcomes that we get, they're really unpredictable. We have no idea what it's going to say with any degree of certainty, right? Sometimes, and sometimes we're like, hey, that's pretty good, pretty incredible.
Well, we're in such early innings. I was laughing so hard this past week when, I don't know if you guys have seen the video of the robots playing soccer in China. Oh my gosh. Like, I was crying. I was laughing so hard. I was like, that's kind of like if I were to play soccer. But it does demonstrate how, like, we've got a lot of great ideas of how we want to leverage it, but I think we're in such early innings on execution. And I thought that was such a good demonstration of that. It's like, oh, that was such a great idea. And, tons of people showed up to watch. They were all excited. And then it ended up being like a complete disaster. But it was hilarious. But I think that's kind of where a good demonstration where we're at with AI. I think we're in such early innings. It's hard to even know what it's capable of at this point.
Yeah. It just is a tool. It's software. It's a new programming language that we have, right? So getting assurance around those things is going to take some time.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's even more complicated sometimes in some of these other environments because the floor beneath you is changing, is shifting. So how do you get assurance over that? It's hard.
Exactly. So, and I think that's what we have to kind of remind ourselves of with 20X. It's like, it's not going to be 100% automated, like not probably until after I retire. So I just think we have to level set our expectations of what this could be, and then just make sure that we're making it scalable, for agencies, because at the end of the day, like, the reason why no agency wants to sponsor now is it's expensive for them. I think I read recently it can cost them, just for the initial authorization, anywhere between $300,000 and $500,000 to review the package and do all of the things. And that's insane when you've got a lot of them using so many different, dozens of cloud service providers.
And it could be even more, because especially given the mechanisms that they had in the past, the mechanisms that they have for assurance. I mean, they gave us, here's what we use. The templates are like, oh my gosh, this is what you use. Are you serious? And, we know some of the tools that they're using in-house, and they're not very good. In fact, people come to us sometimes to use our tool so that they can talk to the other tools that they're using. I'm like, all right, yeah, go ahead. I'm like, it's so weird, a lot of the things that they're required to do. It's Andrej Karpathy. I looked it up.
There it
Yeah,
is.
there it is. Software in the era of AI is awesome. I recommend listening to it. Yeah, put a link in the notes.
Good to know.
For sure. You should listen to it or watch it. You got to watch it. It's
Yeah.
actually one of those generational
I love it.
things.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all changes over the next little bit. And obviously, I think most people, and we've talked about this a couple times, but I think most people in the FedRAMP cybersecurity space can appreciate and are rooting for the direction that FedRAMP is meaning to go to. But when it first got announced, there was a little minute of panic, and everybody, we were hearing 3 PAOs are going away, and then we're like, no, it's only the 3 PAOs, and then it's anyway, there was an element, a little bit of panic in the space, and you could see some companies that came out of that spiraling, and some that came out of it leading. And for you guys at Coalfire, you definitely took the bull by the horns and came out as leaders. Was that something intentional that you guys looked at? Was that just company culture? That's who you are. It's how you react to this kind of thing. Talk to me about what that was like at Coalfire when all the changes got announced.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are members of Alliance for Digital Innovation. So we were one of the first organizations, to hear the details of what the FedRAMP 20X vision was. And so we kind of had some time to digest it, I think, before the rest of the world got to hear. And not that it wasn't all public information. Don't worry, Pete. I know everybody had equal access to the information. But I think we're constantly looking to improve how we deliver our services. We developed our own internal tool on the assessment side called Compliance Essentials. And we're constantly trying to iterate what that tool can do to help simplify the assessment process, not just for FedRAMP, but across all assessments that our customers are looking to become compliant with. It's truly trying to do the use once, do many, or do once, use many, where it can map across all the controls and everything like that. And now we just added in an AI component where it can automate the policy and procedure review. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible too. So of course we're going to jump on the bandwagon of 20X, but we also have to remember the customers that are already in the process of Rev 5 or have already achieved Rev 5. And then of course, our biggest concern always is going to be securing federal data. But anything, our mission has always been at Coalfire, accelerating, the modernization of our government. How do we get technology into their hands as quickly as possible so that we can modernize our government? And so that was one of the, driving forces behind 20X, is accelerating that and bringing more technology, more capabilities to the government. And who wouldn't want that? I mean, I always tell the story about, my experience with the IRS during COVID. I got a bill in the mail for $340-something thousand that I owed. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And obviously it was a glitch. But during COVID, you couldn't get in touch with anybody. You'd call and it wouldn't even ring. It would go straight to.
I got one of those too.
Mhm.
Super frustrating.
And so it's but what an example of, dang, we need to modernize our government. The fact that you couldn't even I spent thousands of dollars trying to resolve that, because I had to go through an accountant, because they're the only ones that had, access to this special number that they had. And so, but that was such a, eye-opening experience for me on how just antiquated we're still operating in the federal government. And if 20X can accelerate, adoption of technology and modernizing how we communicate with the American people, like who wouldn't get behind that? Um, and obviously for DoD as well. I mean, like anytime we can modernize how we are, how we're protecting our nation. I mean, like who wouldn't be on board with that mission? But it's with a healthy dose of skepticism. Because of course well, we really want to do this, but we don't know how we're going to do it. So we need you to figure it out. And when you're already working with cloud service providers who have dumped millions of dollars into achieving Rev 5 the old fashioned way, and now you're saying, okay, well, now it's not enough that you've already dumped millions of dollars. Now we're going to ask you to dump even more to figure out how do we automate all of this. We want to be part of the solution too. Like we're already starting to integrate like AI and how we're delivering our services, or how we can integrate it. We're looking at use cases as well. We've done it, like I said, in Compliance Essentials already, and we're obviously leveraging Paramify to try and help automate, documentation development because nobody's coming to us because, wow, you really write a great SSP. They're coming to us for expertise because we know how to meet the controls, how to meet the KSIs that have been defined, and because we've been doing this for decades at this point, and we know what they're looking for. We know what's acceptable to most agencies because we've worked with most of the agencies at this point, and so that's really the value that we're still bringing. The administrative stuff. I mean, if we can automate that and Kanban and poem management, and those are just ripe for automation, right? But some of the other stuff I think is going to be a little more complicated. I mean, we're even dealing with one enterprise organization now that, they want to centralize all of their compliance and, automate a lot of it. But they're like, we're dealing with multiple business units and not all of them are going to allow us to just set up an API and be able to pull data because a lot of these are through acquisitions and stuff like that. There's a lot of politics at play there. So that's why I say, like, as we get more complicated or as we get more complex architectures and organizations, that's when I think the challenges are going to be even more.
Totally. You need people who know what they're doing when you're doing these assessments. Security is really hard. I don't think we're close to the easy button, or it's just requires more advanced solutions now. You mentioned DoD, so that we know that they're not quite on board yet with 20X, right? And DISA's not doing that. So we have, there you go, especially the cloud service providers, those that have these segregated environments, like they have their GovCloud and then they have their commercial. And the hope with 20X was that you wouldn't need that anymore. But now it seems like the GovClouds will be like DoD clouds. We also have still, I think, in the industry, a lot of confusion around where CMMC applies because we have cloud service providers that will be like, hey, can you do CMMC for us? We're like, well, you can do your documents in here, but like, why are you doing CMMC? Do you run into that a lot?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, all the
absolutely.
time.
Yeah. And I think, like, DoD not being on board with 20X, I mean, they weren't on board with FedRAMP at first either, and then they ended up adopting it. I think they're kind of like, yeah, you do you figure it out. And then once you figure it out, then we'll decide if we like it or not. So I can see if it's a success because they want to modernize too. I mean, they've put out, an RFI for modernizing the way that they, operate as well as it relates to compliance. And so, I think it's going to be the same, right? Like, I think they're in wait and see mode. Like, you guys figure it out. And if you do, then we'll go there. But until then, we're sticking with the tried and true. So I could see it going in that direction. But yeah, CMMC, we talked about this yesterday, like, um, self-attestation is never going to be successful. And I think CMMC is such a great example of that. But I agree, there's a lot of confusion out there. I mean, do I have to do CMMC? Do I not have to do CMMC? And then you've got the FedRAMP equivalency component. If you're a cloud service and you are being leveraged by a member of the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base, then, you have to meet FedRAMP moderate equivalency. And then that doesn't fall into 20X either. So that makes it even more complicated, right? So they're still following Rev 5 when they're talking about FedRAMP moderate equivalency. And so, like, yeah, people that want to get on board with 20X, like, they don't have an option if they're dealing with the DoD at this point. They have to follow the Rev 5 path. And as far as like whether CMMC, is applicable or not and where it's applicable, I mean, ultimately, if you are in the DIB, it's applicable. And if you are a cloud service provider who is leveraged as part of whatever, service the DIB contractor is providing to the federal government, then it's applicable. And where it's applicable is the fun part, right? Like, that's why we get paid. Because, identifying the boundary, it's more complex than a cloud service, right? Because, it goes all the way down to the
Printers.
endpoints.
Yeah, to these little laptops.
Mhm.
That's why we
Mobile
have this
devices,
little
your mouse
control
jiggler,
on
yeah.
our mouse jiggler.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, that's what makes it definitely more complicated and why a lot of organizations are wanting like a separate enclave just for their CUI because they don't want to apply all of the CMMC requirements to their whole entire enterprise. Like they just want to be able to concentrate it where they're actually, CUI is residing. So, that's one of the things that Coalfire now provides is the ability to build out that separate CMMC enclave. So
smart. Yeah, because a lot of the requirements would force a very archaic approach to doing work and getting work done. You're just like,
well, and with 800-171, the parameters really aren't defined. So it's somewhat like FedRAMP 20X. It's sort of FSMA-like where there's the controls that are there, but how you implement the controls is pretty flexible.
Yeah. A lot of people totally go with those 103 controls as KSIs, but then they don't actually take into account the assessment criteria. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know.
Right, exactly.
I'm like, well, it's right there, the assessment criteria. That's why we chose to build our application to factor that in at the get-go. Say like, hey, let's just make sure you're hitting the assessment criteria.
Yeah.
Right? Which can also be a little bit loose depending on the parameters. So anyway. Yeah. Okay. So that's super nerdy. Yeah, I love talking about it. Yeah.
Love getting nerdy.
Yeah. You guys don't like coconut, do you? I'm enjoying this.
No.
Doctor, did you know that Utah has kind of a little bit of a monopoly on Dr. Pepper creamy coconut?
I did not know
love
that.
it here in Utah.
There was was it last year? They were like shipping it out of stores in Idaho and Colorado to Utah because it was selling so fast.
No one else likes it.
Not a lot of people in Utah drink the flavored sodas are,
Yeah, I like coconut. I just don't like the texture of coconut. So
Yeah.
as long as it's
That's
like
what I'm talking about.
I can drink a pina colada,
Mm,
but like
yes.
I don't want to chew my pina colada.
Do you like pina colada? No?
love pina colada.
Really?
I
See,
just don't want
that's
the
coconut.
texture.
Exactly.
It's yeah.
Okay.
I will take
We
my
can be
pina
friends.
colada a little heavy on the pineapple, if I'm being honest.
I agree.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
I
And I
love
can
it.
only have one because after that it's nauseating.
Yeah.
Really?
A little too sweet.
Too
I could
sweet.
drink my weight in pina coladas, man.
I
And
could
I
eat
do
my
in
weight in
fact.
donuts.
It will make you gain weight.
I know.
So
I've learned.
I love it.
Okay, so like anyways, you are a mentor in your role. Did you ever have to Google what does an executive vice president of the company do? Did you ever go?
I don't know that I've ever Googled it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think that's every executive, right? Like you've never been an executive before. So it's like what, when you're having board level conversations, that's a different conversation than having, a conversation at the VP level where you're really just dealing with executives.
Okay. So
So they care about different things. And so, certainly that was a learning curve for me. Like, what do they care about? And, when you're trying to, I mean, we're owned by a PE firm. And so, and we're at the end of, or not the end, but we're kind of, it's 5 years in now. And so everybody knows the cycle of a PE firm. So we want continued investment to be able to improve how we deliver our services and modernize and everything like that. And having those types of conversations to understand, okay, what do you need to know so that I can move forward with these things? I think that's been actually the fun part of the job. But yeah, I mean, I think I do talk a lot to like college students and stuff like that, just by virtue of some of the things that I do on the side. And it's funny because all of them graduate and they're like terrified in their first job. And they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing because, gosh, college is great and it's a lot of fun, but it really doesn't give you a lot of practical experience unless you've done like an internship. But even internships, like a lot of them aren't really providing you like the experience you're going to need in your first job. And I always like go back to my own story when I'm talking to them because I was like, guys, I was a psychology major. Sorry, the curtain just fell.
Yeah,
I was
felt.
like, don't fall all the way.
Yeah.
Um, but I was a psychology major and knew nothing about cybersecurity, and now I'm an executive at a cybersecurity firm. So, like, I have no reason that I should be here, and but I figured it out. And Google is your friend, and I didn't have ChatGPT back then, or Claude, or all of my best friends that I have now. Like, I had Google. And Google was my friend. I can remember doing SSP interviews, working sessions, and I literally had no idea what I was talking about. And like they would ask me questions, I would ask them a question, and then they would ask me a follow up. And I was like, maybe a millimeter deep in my in my understanding of what I was even asking for in the beginning. And I remember like they'd ask me something about like Windows Active Directory, and I'd be like, while I'm on the call. I was like, thank God we're remote. And I'd be like Googling what's Windows Active Directory. That's how clueless I started. So, I think my advice to anybody looking to get into this field that's terrified is if you're really interested in it, like do it because, there's so much information out there. And, I know a lot of the reasons why people work at Coalfire is because if you ask, the number one reason is the people. And it's because everybody, and I'm sure it's like this at a lot of organizations, like everybody is always willing to help you if you ask. And one of the biggest things that held me back in my career in the beginning was I was afraid to let people know what I didn't know. And once I let that go and I just embraced my cluelessness, like that's when I felt like I really started to grow.
Yeah. You almost get scared. You look stupid if you ask questions.
Yes.
But it's the opposite. People, like when you ask good questions, you actually look smarter. And
Right.
it helps you.
And everybody else probably has the same question. So just ask it.
The trepidation with exposing that you don't know anything is really interesting to me. I was always like, super open about, yeah, like I actually know nothing. And that's what's so great about being an auditor is I'm like, hey, I actually have no idea. So you have to tell me what you do in your job and explain it to me like I don't know what you're talking about. Because guess what? I don't know what you're talking about. But I can also, if I can say it back to you, and it makes sense to me, that's good, right? Because I'm like super simple-minded, right? So I gotta like, if I understand it, that's great. And I think that there still is that today in 2025. There's the trepidation of exposing what you don't know, and so you have a lot of bad decisions that come from that. That people that are unconsciously incompetent. And then you make a lot of bad decisions, but because you have charisma or because you have position, you can make a decision. But security is so hard. We've talked about it today. It's an inch deep and a mile wide at least, and you need to get really deep in certain areas to make good decisions. And so over time, right, it's like you become consciously incompetent. Like you're like, okay, I know what I don't know. And then you just grow that sphere of that circle of competence over time. And that there's no substitute for it.
And cybersecurity is actually a pretty good industry to do that in. So I just started getting into this a couple of years ago now. And I remember after like the first month of being on demos and talking to people, I grabbed Kenny and I was like, okay, I've heard all these words. Control requirement, component, parameter, these are all the same things, right? And he's like, oh no, definitely not the same things. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so I'm an idiot.
That's okay.
But people in the space are actually really like willing to welcome people into it. And I think it's because a lot of people in cybersecurity are pretty mission driven. Like what you've said, where like they care a lot about protecting the country and protecting the federal data. And so if you've got smart people that want to be part of it, they're like, yeah, I'll help you out. Like just ask questions, and people are an open book and super willing to share. And so Yeah, as the newest into the space, Kenny's CISSP emeritus, and I'm forthcoming, maybe. Probably not, but maybe. No.
Let's be honest. Come on. Come on. No, I might take it again. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Not going to do it.
Well,
It lapsed.
Maybe. Probably.
And it's a small world, right? Like when I think of how long I've been doing this, and I just run into the same people over and over again, like, you know, that I've worked with. Even when I go to conferences, it's like I feel like, oh, it's like a reunion. We all know each other. And I mean, to the point where it's like you're hugging everybody. And so it really is a small, like, little universe that we're in. And that's the other beauty of it is like threats are always evolving, right? So even if you think you're an expert today, like you're not an expert tomorrow because the threats are the threat landscape is constantly changing, and so like it never gets old. Like you're constantly learning something new, and dealing with different adversaries, and I think that's why it's fun to be here because it's not like off or what is it, Groundhog Day, where you just wake up and every day feels the same. Like, that's not true. It's
Today's
what we
a great
do.
day to be alive.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, Karen, thanks so much for coming.
absolutely.
Yeah, over to Utah. That's so awesome. How lucky are we? Awesome. So good.
So great.
Yep,
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
absolutely. Happy to
Appreciate
be here. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
You
Yeah.
bet. Let's do it again.
All right, done.
Ciao.